Niam Babatunde, 46, was a beauty salon on a busy Milwaukee street, attracting customers with a bright sign and an impeccable reputation. At the receptionist's desk, Niamh Babatunde reigned supreme. She was 46, but she looked so beautiful that many visitors refused to believe her age. But most important was the elusive aura of confidence and vitality that surrounded her. "Darling, if your wife finds out you've come for a haircut on your day off, she'll think you're on a date," Niamh said with a laugh to her client, who was nervously glancing at his watch. "Relax and enjoy the moment. Cheryl will do your hair in such a way that your wife will want a date." The man smiled embarrassedly, while the rest of the salon's customers enjoyed watching Niamh's show. Her loud, infectious laugh sounded like a melody, filling the space with energy. She could talk to anyone as if she had known them all their lives, and within 5 minutes the most sullen customer was smiling and feeling special. "Niamh, you're impossible." Cheryl, the older hairdresser, shook her head. "How do you manage to disarm all these men?" "Honey, I just don't pretend. I'm 46, and I'm too old for games," Niamh replied, adjusting the wide silver ring in the cartilage of her left ear, a massive piece of jewelry with a flat surface and an intricate pattern. The ring was her trademark, as were many other silver pieces of jewelry that she changed, but never removed all at once. "Silver is the metal of the moon, and I am a child of the night," she jokingly explained her love for the metal. The rays of sunlight streaming through the salon's wide windows played on her jewelry as she moved gracefully between chairs, cracking jokes with customers and staff. Even the mundane act of dialing the phone or pouring coffee looked like a small performance, hypnotizing those around her. Few could believe that such a woman had a daughter, a quiet, inconspicuous nurse. And yet, Shanti Babatunde had inherited her mother's beauty, only muted, like light through frosted glass. This morning, Shanti was concentrating on the wound of an elderly patient at the city hospital. Bundled hair, neat uniform, minimal makeup, the complete opposite of the flamboyant Niamh. "You are so careful, Nurse Babatunde," the patient remarked as she carefully applied the bandage. "Many young nurses are in a hurry, but you are not." "Thank you, Mr. Coleman. I'm just doing my job," Shanti replied without looking up. Her co-workers appreciated her for her thoroughness and attention to detail, but often joked that she could use a little relaxation. Shanti was used to such remarks. All her life she had heard comparisons to her mother. "Why don't you smile like Niamh? Your mom has such an infectious laugh and you're so serious." Instead of fighting these comparisons, Shanti embraced her role of being the opposite of the extravagant Niamh. The calm rhythm of the hospital day was disrupted when a young man burst into the emergency room, supporting a friend with a bloody arm. "Help!" Jamal cut himself in the workshop. "A piece of metal got caught," he explained as he helped his friend sit up. Shanti quickly assessed the situation and started treating the wound. As she worked, the wounded man's gaze kept returning to her. He was tall, with expressive dark eyes and a short haircut. "There will be a scar, but that's okay," Shanti said, finishing the stitches. "You're lucky the wound is clean. Tyrone, you should thank that fine nurse. If it wasn't for you, I'd be bleeding to death in your wreck," the injured man joked. "Thank you," Tyrone finally spoke, and in his voice, Shanti could hear the sincere gratitude. "You saved my best mechanic." "Do you work at a machine shop?" Shanti asked, putting her tools away. "Yeah, Jay's on 18th Street. Yeah, I'm the head mechanic there," Tyrone answered, and Shanti saw him rub the back of his neck nervously. Their conversation was brief, but the next day, Tyrone showed up at the hospital again, this time without his wounded friend, but with a small bouquet of wildflowers. He was waiting for Shanti after her shift, shuffling from foot to foot. "I thought I'd thank you again for Jamal," he began, holding out the flowers. "That's my job, but thank you," Shanti replied, accepting the bouquet. "How is he feeling?" "Good, complaining that now he has an excuse to shirk his hard work," Tyrone grinned. They got to talking. and soon Shanti learned that Tyrone was 24, born and raised in Milwaukee, had gone to work at an auto repair shop after high school, and had eventually become the best mechanic there. His sincerity and a certain awkwardness in his communication was endearing. Shanti was used to cocky guys trying to impress. Their first date was a week later, lunch at a small cafe near the hospital. Tyrone talked about his work, about his older sister Layla, who had studied to be a lawyer and was now smart about everything, about his plans to open his own workshop someday. "And your family?" he asked. Shanti hesitated a moment. "Just my mom. My father left when I was 8. "Do you get along with her?" "In different ways," Shanti answered evasively. "She's a very bright person. She works as a receptionist in a beauty parlor." Shanti did not go into the details of their complicated relationship with her mother. How could she explain that living with Niamh was like living in the shade of a spreading tree where the sun could not penetrate? Their relationship developed slowly. Tyrone didn't rush things, and Shanti appreciated that. He'd pick her up after his shift, they'd go to the movies, walk in the park. Sometimes Tyrone would stop by the hospital on his lunch break just to see her for a few minutes. Gradually, Shanti began to trust this kind, a little clumsy in showing her feelings to the guy. After a month of meetings, Tyrone finally decided to kiss her while walking along the waterfront. His lips were soft, and his embrace was tentative, as if he was afraid to spook the moment. "I'm sorry, I'm not very experienced at this," he confessed embarrassedly afterward. Shanti smiled, feeling oddly relieved. With Tyrone, there was no need to pretend to be experienced or sophisticated. 3 months into their relationship, the moment Shanti had both looked forward to and dreaded at the same time had arrived: Tyrone's introduction to her mother. She put off the moment as long as she could, but finally agreed to a family dinner. "Don't worry so much," Tyrone said as they approached Babatunde's house one spring evening. "I'm sure your mom is great for raising a daughter like that." Shanti only smiled weakly. If only he knew. The door opened before they could ring the bell. Niamh stood on the doorstep, radiant, in a tight red dress that emphasized every curve of her figure, a glass of wine in her hand. "Finally," she exclaimed, hugging Shanti. "I thought you would never introduce me to your young man." Her gaze slid to Tyrone, and Shanti saw him freeze for a moment, as if hypnotized. It was a familiar sight. Men always reacted to Niamh like that. But usually Shanti wasn't bothered by it. "Tyrone Kumalo," she introduced. "Tyrone, this is my mother, Niamh Babatunde." "Nice to meet you," Tyrone muttered, extending his hand. Instead of a handshake, Niamh hugged him, and Shanti noticed her mother linger in the embrace for a moment, a little longer than necessary. "How tall you are." Niamh pulled away, but left her hands on Tyrone's shoulders. "And such strong shoulders. You must work physically a lot, don't you?" "I'm an auto mechanic," Tyrone answered, and his voice sounded a little different than usual. "How interesting," Niamh exclaimed, pulling them both into the house. "I adore men who can work with their hands." All evening, Shanti watched her mother charm Tyrone, effortlessly, just being herself. Niamh told stories that made them both laugh, asked about Tyrone's work with genuine interest, got up to pour wine or bring appetizers, and her every movement was executed with such grace that it was impossible to look away. Shanti watched Tyrone gradually relax, laughing at Niamh's jokes, answering her questions in an increasingly animated manner. By the end of the evening, he seemed utterly enchanted. As they were about to leave, Niamh suddenly suggested that Tyrone take a look at an old car she had gotten from her ex-husband. "It's been sitting in the garage and hasn't started for a year," she explained. "Why don't you take a look at it sometime and see what's wrong with it?" "Sure," Tyrone agreed readily. "I can come by this weekend." "That would be wonderful." Niamh smiled, and Shanti noticed the silver jewelry gleaming in the hallway light as her mother flipped her hair back from her face. Already outside, Tyrone couldn't stop talking about what a wonderful mother Shanti had. "She's nothing like I imagined," he admitted. "She's so lively, so energetic. and the way she cooks. Shanti nodded silently. Somehow Tyrone's words hurt her, though she had expected a similar reaction. A few days later, Tyrone actually came to see Neve's car. Shanti was on duty at the hospital, so he went alone. When she returned from work, she found him and her mother in the kitchen. They were drinking tea and talking animatedly. Noticing her daughter, Neve brightened up. "Shanti, my dear, your young man is a wizard. The car is running again, can you imagine?" Tyrone looked pleased. There was an oil stain on his cheek, which he was apparently trying to scrub off. "It was just a wiring problem," he explained. "Nothing complicated." "He's too modest." Neve put her hand on Tyrone's shoulder. "It took him almost 3 hours." After dinner, when it was just the two of them, Shanti asked Tyrone how it had gone. "Fine," he replied, but something in his voice made her wary. "Your mom, she's very unusual." "In what way?" Shanti asked cautiously. Tyrone hesitated. "I don't know how to explain it. It's like she's radiating something. When she's around, it's hard to think about anything else." Shanti felt her insides clench with a familiar ache. All her life she'd heard similar things from friends, from boyfriends, from everyone who'd met her mother. "Yes, she is," Shanti replied briefly. That evening, before leaving, Tyrone lingered in the kitchen where Neve was washing dishes. Shanti was looking for her bag in the living room and overheard their conversation. "You know, I've never met a woman like you." Tyrone's voice sounded muffled. "What kind of woman?" A smile could be heard in Neve's tone. "So, confident. I'm not very good with women in general. Even with Shanti, sometimes I don't know how to behave." There was a pause, and Shanti froze, clutching the bag she had found. "It comes with experience," Neve replied softly. "If you want, I can give you some tips. We women are not as complicated as we seem." Shanti cautiously peeked into the kitchen. Tyrone was standing leaning against the table, and Neve was standing very close to him, lightly touching his arm. "I wish I could," Tyrone said, and something in his voice made Shanti's heart clench painfully. Tyrone started showing up at Babatundi's house more and more often. At first, under reasonable excuses, to help with a leaky faucet, to fix a door lock, to adjust the television. He would come in the evening or on weekends, when Shanti was usually at home. But gradually the visits began to happen in her absence. "I dropped by to check on the faucet," he would explain, when Shanti returned from duty and found him drinking tea with Neve in the kitchen. "Tyrone was helping me move a cupboard," Neve said another time, her voice sounding completely innocent. Shanti tried not to pay much attention to these encounters. After all, what was strange about her boyfriend getting along well with her mother? A lot of girls have to deal with tension between boyfriend and parents, and she had no such problems. That's fine, she convinced herself. It's normal. But something had changed between her and Tyrone. He'd become distracted, often losing the thread of the conversation, staring off into space. Sometimes he suddenly canceled dates, citing a work emergency. Their physical intimacy, which had always been tender and reverent, now seemed mechanical to Shanti, as if Tyrone's thoughts hovered somewhere far away. "You've been kind of weird lately," she remarked one evening as they watched a movie in her room. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing," Tyrone answered too quickly. "Just tired at work." In the meantime, Neve had blossomed even more, if that was even possible. She had updated her closet, started getting a new hairstyle, and seemed to coincidentally always be home when Tyrone came over. One day, Shanti came home from the hospital earlier than usual. Her shift had been cut short due to electrical problems in the ward. She hadn't warned either her mother or Tyrone about her early return. As she entered the house, she heard voices from the kitchen and quiet chuckles. "Really? I've never done that before." Tyrone's voice sounded surprised and interested at the same time. "Oh, honey, that's just one way." Neve's melodious laugh made Shanti freeze in the hallway. "Women like variety." Shanti walked silently to the kitchen door. Neve stood at the countertop, slicing fruit, and Tyrone was nearby, obscenely close. Her mother was saying something in his ear, which made Tyrone blush but not move away. Shanti quietly backed away and walked out of the house, carefully closing the door behind her. On woozy legs, she walked to the next block, sat on a bench in a small public garden, and sat there for almost an hour until she froze. Then she returned home, slamming the door loudly and shouting, "I'm home!" When she entered the kitchen, Tyrone and Neve were sitting at the table, with cups of tea, a decent distance apart. But Shanti noticed the slight blush on Tyrone's cheeks and the glint in her mother's eyes. "You're early today." Neve smiled at her daughter. "Tyrone stopped by to leave you the keys to his apartment." "Yeah, I'm going to go to my sister's this weekend." Tyrone tapped his fingers nervously on the table. "Thought you could use them in case you wanted to get something from my apartment." Shanti nodded, not knowing whether to believe the story. She wanted to believe it, but an inner voice told her something was wrong. In the following weeks, that voice grew louder and louder. Shanti noticed the long looks exchanged between Tyrone and Neve when she thought she couldn't see, the casual touches, the quickly interrupted conversations at her appearance. But most importantly, Tyrone had changed. He now looked at Neve more often than Shanti, listened intently to her stories and laughed at her jokes. "I want to talk about my mom," Shanti said one day when she and Tyrone were having dinner at his apartment. "What about her?" Tyrone continued to eat without looking up. "You spend a lot of time with her." "She's an interesting person," Tyrone shrugged. "And your mother, isn't it good that we get along?" "It would be good if you just got along," Shanti set her fork aside. "But sometimes I think there's more to it than that." Tyrone finally looked at her, a flicker of concern in his eyes, then irritation. "What do you mean?" "It's your mother, Shanti. She's 46. What's there between us?" "That's what I want to know," Shanti insisted. "Look," Tyrone sighed. "Neve is just helping me with advice. I told you I'm not very experienced with women. She's giving me guidance." "Guidance?" Shanti felt a chill inside. "What kind?" "The usual." Tyrone looked away. "How to understand women better, what they want, that sort of thing." The conversation ended with nothing, but from that day on, their relationship had been strained. Shanti felt Tyrone growing distant, making excuses not to see each other. And when they did spend time together, he often mentioned Neve, telling her what she'd advised or recalling her stories. At the hospital, colleagues began to notice changes in Shanti. She became absent-minded, mixed up her medication twice, which had never happened before. "Are you okay?" they asked. "Shouldn't you take a day off?" But Shanti didn't want to go home. Home had become a place where she felt superfluous, like an uninvited guest at a party of two close people. One day she noticed a small reddish mark on Tyrone's neck, a hickey she hadn't left. Shanti remained silent, but inside, everything shivered. There was less doubt now. That evening, Shanti went into her mother's room to borrow a hair clip. On Neve's bedside table lay a bunch of keys with a keychain shaped like the logo of Jay's auto shop. Tyrone's keys. What were they doing in her mother's bedroom? Shanti took the keys, and that's when Neve walked in. "What are you doing in my room?" she asked, but with no real annoyance, more like mild surprise. "I wanted to borrow a hairpin," Shanti replied, picking up her keys. "These are Tyrone's keys. Why do you have them?" Neve smiled, but her eyes remained wary. "He left them yesterday when he came by to help with that closet. I was going to give them back, but I forgot." Shanti slowly put the keys back. Perhaps her mother was telling the truth. Perhaps everything was innocent, but her whole gut screamed otherwise. She hadn't said anything that night, but there was a rage boiling inside that Shanti had never felt before. 2 days later, she received a call from the hospital to switch shifts with a colleague who had a family emergency. Shanti agreed, but decided to stop by the house first to get a clean uniform. She quietly entered the house around noon. Muffled voices and quiet laughter came from her mother's bedroom. Shanti's heart was beating so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of her chest. Slowly, on tiptoe, She approached the bedroom door, which was ajar. Inside, on the bed where her parents had once slept, Tyrone and Neve were making love. They were so engrossed in each other that they hadn't noticed her presence. Shanti watched, unable to look away, as her boyfriend kissed her mother's neck, as her mother arched beneath him, hugging him with her long legs. "You're incredible," Tyrone whispered, and his voice, filled with desire, was like a knife stabbing into Shanti's heart. She pushed the door open with force, and it slammed against the wall with a thud. Neve and Tyrone froze, then recoiled from each other. Neve covered herself with a sheet, but didn't look particularly embarrassed or guilty. Tyrone turned pale, his eyes widening with horror. "Shanti, I can explain." "Explain?" Her voice shook with rage. "What exactly do you want to explain?" "Honey," Neve began in the tone she used to soothe cranky customers in the salon, "don't make a big deal out of it. We're adults." "Grown-ups?" Shanti stepped into the room. "You're my mother, and you," she looked at Tyrone, "you're my boyfriend. How could you two?" "Shanti, listen." Tyrone pulled on his jeans, tangling in his pant legs. "It just happened. I didn't mean to hurt you." "It just happened?" Shanti laughed, but there was no mirth in her laugh, only pain. How many times had it just happened? Tyrone was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. "Oh my God." Shanti covered her face with her hands. "How long has it been happening? What difference does it make?" Neve got up from the bed, wrapping herself in a sheet. "What's done is done. You would have found out sooner or later anyway." "Mom, how could you?" Shanti's voice was painful. "You knew he was important to me." Neve sighed, rolling her eyes. "Listen, Shanti," she spoke as if she was explaining the obvious to a child. "Tyrone is a young man with certain needs. He came to me for advice on how to be a better lover for you. I was just, demonstrating." "Demonstrating?" Shanti felt her insides boiling. "You always do this. You always take everything from me." "Don't be dramatic," Neve brushed it off. "If he left so easily for someone else, it means that he didn't really love you." "Someone else?" Shanti took a step towards her mother. "You're not another. You're my mother. You're supposed to protect me, not this." Niamh shrugged, and that gesture, full of indifference, was the last straw. "You know what?" Neve said with a slight chuckle. "Maybe if you were a little more like me, he wouldn't seek comfort in my bed. Tyrone's a man. He needs a woman, not an intimidated mouse." The argument had moved to the kitchen. Neve had already thrown on a robe, and now stood leaning against the countertop, looking like a man who'd had enough of all the noise. "Let's all calm down," she said. "Would you like some coffee?" I was just about to make some. This nonchalance, this offer of coffee, as if nothing much had happened, overflowed Shanti's patience. She watched her mother turn to the cabinet to get the coffee as she raised her hand to the top shelf where the tin stood. "How can you be like this?" Shanti's voice shook. "How can you stand there offering coffee like you didn't steal my boyfriend from me?" "Don't be dramatic." Neve opened the locker door. "I didn't steal anything from you, just because you don't know how to hold on to a man." Shanti didn't remember crossing the kitchen. She pushed her mother forcefully, and Neve, who hadn't expected the attack, slammed her back against the countertop. "Shanti!" Tyrone exclaimed, trying to get between them. "Don't you dare touch her!" Neve pushed him away, anger sparkling in her eyes. "Ungrateful girl, I gave you everything, sacrificed everything for you." "You sacrificed nothing!" Shanti shouted. "You always thought only of yourself." Neve laughed, loudly, harshly. "Do you really think I seduced Tyrone? Honey, it didn't take him long to come to me. You know what he said? That you're cold in bed, that you're boring." "That's not true," Tyrone protested, but Shanti could see in his eyes that his mother wasn't lying. "You see, some women just know how to satisfy a man," Neve continued, turning to the cupboard for coffee. "And some just aren't cut out for it." Shanti saw the open locker door right at the level of her mother's head. A tall, heavy door. Without thinking, without realizing what she was doing, she slammed the door with force when Neve's head was right in her path. The door hit Neve's face with force. Shanti saw the wide silver ring in her mother's ear gleam in the light of the kitchen lamps. Overwhelmed with rage, she swung the door open again and slammed it shut again, hitting her mother on the head each time. "Shanti, stop!" Tyrone rushed toward her, trying to pull her away. But Shanti couldn't hear anymore. In a moment, she realized her mother was no longer standing. Neve had slid to the floor, leaving a bloody trail on the closet door. Her wide-open eyes stared into the void, and blood oozed from the wound on her head, soaking into her silk robe. "Oh my God," Tyrone whispered, kneeling down next to Neve's body. "Oh my God, Shanti, what have you done?" Reality hit Shanti like an icy shower. She collapsed next to her mother, trying to feel for a pulse, but deep inside she already knew Neve was dead. "I didn't mean to." Shanti's voice sounded strange, as if it belonged to someone else. I didn't think." Tyrone ran his hand over his face, leaving a trail of blood on his cheek. "We need to call an ambulance, the police." "No!" Shanti grabbed his arm. "They'll think I did it on purpose. Wouldn't they?" Tyrone asked quietly, and his eyes, full of terror, met hers. Shanti stared at her dead mother, at the blood, at the open closet. A plan slowly formed in her mind. "The closet," she whispered. "We can say it fell on her, accidentally." Tyrone shook his head. "No one would believe that." "They will if we do it right." Shanti stood up. "We need to unscrew it from the wall, tip it against her. Say she was trying to get coffee off the top shelf and the cabinet fell." Tyrone looked at her with horror and pity. "Shanti, it was murder." "It was an accident," she screamed. "I didn't mean to kill her. Just help me, please. I can't lose everything. You and her and my life. Please, Tyrone." They looked at each other in silence over Neve's body. Then Tyrone nodded slowly. "Okay. Do you have the tools?" They spent the next hour working feverishly. Tyrone unscrewed a cabinet from the wall, and together they tipped it over Neve's body. Shanti wiped the blood off the floor. Tyrone adjusted the body to make it look plausible. When everything was ready, they stepped back and looked at the scene of their work. A large kitchen cabinet lay on the floor, with Neve's body underneath it and scattered coffee beans next to it. "It looks realistic," Tyrone said uncertainly. Shanti pulled out her cell phone and dialed the emergency number. Her voice was shaking, but now it was working for their story. "Please help," she sobbed into the receiver. "The kitchen cabinet fell on my mom. She's not moving. Please come quickly." Sirens cut through the silence of the residential neighborhood. One by one, cars pulled up to Babatundi's house. First the ambulance, then the police. Neighbors spilled out into the street, watching curiously and anxiously. Shanti and Tyrone stood on the porch, pale and confused, greeting the arrivals. "Where is she?" the first paramedic asked, grabbing a bag. "In the kitchen." Shanti pointed inside the house, her voice shaking. "A cupboard fell on top of her. I don't know if she's breathing." The medics hurried inside, and a few minutes later, an unremarkable sedan pulled up to the house, from which a tall man in a smart suit got out. He leisurely looked around the gathered crowd before approaching Shanti and Tyrone. "Detective Kweku Adetoyi," he introduced himself, showing his badge. "Did you report the accident?" "Yes." Shanti nodded, her eyes red from crying. "My mom, there's a kitchen cabinet." "I see." Adetoyi cast a glance at Tyrone, who stood a little aside, rubbing his hands together nervously. "And you?" "Tyrone Kumalo." He extended his hand to shake. "I'm Shanti's guy. Was here when it all happened." The detective shook his hand, holding it a little longer than usual, as if assessing the strength of his grip. At that moment, a paramedic came out of the house, his face grim. "I'm sorry," he said, looking at Shanti. "Your mother is dead. Apparently, she died instantly." Shanti sobbed, covering her face with her hands. Tyrone put his arm around her shoulders in a gesture of support. "I need to inspect the scene," Adetoy said, "and then I would like to hear exactly what happened." He made his way to the house where the medics were already preparing the body for transportation. Adetoy stopped them. "Just a moment." He bent down, scrutinizing the face of the deceased and her injuries. Nyama Babatunde was lying on the kitchen floor, her body half crushed by a heavy overhead cabinet. Coffee beans were scattered around. The detective frowned, noticing the nature of the injuries on her head. Several uniform impact injuries, as if from repeated impact with a hard object, rather than the single massive blow one would expect from an entire cabinet falling. "Did anyone touch the body or the cabinet after the accident?" he asked, straightening up. "We tried to lift the cabinet to help her," Tyrone answered quickly. "But it's too heavy." Adetoy nodded slowly, keeping his eyes on the closet. His gaze slid down the wall, where fresh screw marks were visible. "I see. Tell me what happened." They moved into the living room. Shanti sat on the couch, Tyrone beside her, and the detective settled into the chair opposite, pulling out a notepad. "We got home and Mom decided to make coffee," Shanti began, her voice breaking with excitement. She reached into the overhead cabinet for a can of beans, and suddenly the cabinet just ripped off the wall and fell right on top of her. "I was in the living room," Tyrone interjected. "I heard a crash and a scream, and I ran into the kitchen and saw—" He swallowed. "I saw Neve under the closet." "Did you try to help her?" Adetoy was writing something down in a notebook. "Yes, of course," Tyrone nodded. "We tried to lift the closet, but we couldn't. That's when Shanti called the emergency services." The detective looked at his notes, then back at the couple in front of him. "How long had that closet been hanging on the wall?" "We bought it about 5 years ago," Shanti replied. "There's never been a problem." "And when was the last time you checked it? The fasteners? The hinges?" Shanti paused. "I don't remember. Mom said the other day that it was wobbly, but we didn't pay much attention." The forensics team started in the kitchen. They were photographing the scene, collecting samples, taking measurements. Adetoy returned to them, watching their work with an impenetrable expression. "Ms. Babatunde," he turned to Shanti, "did your mother have any health problems? Dizzy spells? Fainting spells?" "No, not that I know of." Shanti shook her head. "She was perfectly healthy." "I see." Adetoy made a note in his notebook. A young, dark-skinned woman in a strict suit appeared on the doorstep. Her eyes darted from the police cars to the house, and she hurried inside. "Tyrone!" she exclaimed when she saw her brother. "What's wrong?" "I got a call from the neighbors, saying the police were here." "Layla!" Tyrone stood up, his face haggard. "It's Neve. She's dead. An accident." Layla Kumalo looked at her brother, then at Shanti, then at the detective. "What kind of accident?" "A kitchen cabinet fell on her," Adetoy explained, watching the woman's reaction. "You—" "Layla Kumalo, Tyrone's sister. I'm a lawyer," she extended her hand. "May I ask what is going on? Why are there so many accident police here?" "Standard procedure for any unnatural death, Ms. Kumalo," Adetoy replied. "We have to make sure it's really an accident." Layla cast a worried glance at her brother, who avoided meeting her eyes. "Tyrone, what were you doing here?" she asked quietly. "Stopped by Shanti's," he shrugged. "It was just a coincidence that I was here when everything happened." Layla frowned incredulously, but remained silent. Meanwhile, one of the CSIs called Detective Adetoy over. "Sir, you should take a look at this." The detective returned to the kitchen, where the examiner pointed to the victim's ear. The wide silver ring that Neve wore in the cartilage of her ear was deformed, and a pattern resembling the shape of a cabinet handle was clearly imprinted in the metal. "Interesting," Adetoy muttered. "Can you explain how this could have happened when an entire cabinet fell?" "No way," the expert shook his head. "For such a deformation and such a clear imprint, you need a directed impact with that particular part of the cabinet. If the whole cabinet had fallen, the damage would have been quite different." The detective nodded thoughtfully, and returned to the living room. His gaze became sharper, more attentive as he looked at Shanti and Tyrone again. "I need to ask you a few more questions," he said. "Separately, if you don't mind." Tyrone visibly tensed. "Why? We've already told you everything." "Standard procedure," Adetoye replied calmly. "Miss Babatunde, can we talk in your room?" Shanti nodded uncertainly and led the detective to the second floor. Layla immediately pulled herself closer to her brother. "What's really going on here?" she whispered. "I can see that you're hiding something." "It's exactly as we said." Tyrone looked away. "An accident." "Tyrone," Layla took his hand. "I'm your sister. I know when you're lying. And right now, I can see that you're in trouble up to your eyeballs. You better tell me so I can help you." In Shanti's room, Detective Adetoye sat on a chair and gestured for her to make herself comfortable on the bed. "Ms. Babatunde," he began bluntly, "my experts have found some inconsistencies in your story. Your mother's injuries are not consistent with the fall of an entire closet, and the silver ring in her ear is deformed in a way that could only have come from a direct blow from the cabinet handle." Shanti turned pale, but remained silent. "In addition," the detective continued, "you can see fresh screw marks on the wall. The cabinet was recently unscrewed, not just dropped." "Yeah, I don't know what you mean." Shanti lowered her gaze. "I think you know," Adetoye said softly. "And I don't think it was an accident." At that moment, a noise came from the hallway. Loud voices, the sound of a struggle. The detective quickly left the room and saw Tyrone trying to break free of the police officer's grip. "I have to tell the truth," he shouted. "I can't do this anymore! Tyrone, be quiet!" Layla stood next to him, her face contorted with alarm. "Let him go," Adetoye commanded the officer. "Mr. Kumalo, what are you saying?" Tyrone looked stricken, fear in his eyes. "It wasn't an accident," he exhaled. "The cabinet didn't fall by itself." "Tyrone, no!" Shanti exclaimed, running out of the room. But it was too late. Detective Adetoye had already made a sign to his men, and in a minute, everyone was back in the living room. Tyrone was sitting in a chair with his head down, Shanti was frozen against the wall, and Layla was pacing nervously around the room. "Mr. Kumalo," Adetoye opened a notebook. "Tell me what really happened." "Shanti and her mother had a fight," Tyrone began, avoiding looking at his girlfriend. "Because of me. Yeah, I was having an affair with Neve." Silence hung in the room. Layla stared at her brother in shock. "Shanti caught us today," Tyrone continued. "She was furious, and I don't blame her. At one point, the argument turned to the kitchen, and Neve said something cruel." "And what happened next?" Adetoye asked. "Shanti pushed her mother." Tyrone didn't look up. "And then, she started hitting her with the closet door, several times. I tried to stop, but it was too late." "Tyrone!" Shanti burst into tears, sliding down the wall. "How could you?" "I'm sorry." Tyrone finally looked at her. "I can't live with this lie." Detective Adetoye turned to Shanti. "Ms. Babatunde, is this true?" Shanti nodded silently, tears rolling down her face. "I didn't mean to kill her," she whispered. "I just snapped. She always took everything from me. She was always better than me, and even Tyrone." "What happened after you realized she was dead?" the detective asked. "We panicked," Tyrone replied. "Shanti suggested faking an accident. I unscrewed the cabinet from the wall and we tipped it over the body." Adetoye closed his notebook and nodded to the officers. "Shanti Babatunde, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Nyama Babatunde. You have the right to remain silent." Layla watched the officers handcuff Shanti, and her eyes were full of pain. "I'll be your lawyer," she said quietly. "We're going to talk about the state of mind." As Shanti was led out of the house, Tyrone was left sitting in the living room with his head down on his hands. Detective Adetoye lingered beside him. "You committed a crime too, Mr. Kumalo," he said. "Helping to cover up a murder is a serious charge." "I know," Tyrone nodded. I am ready to be punished. Adetoy looked at him carefully. Why did you decide to confess? Tyrone raised his eyes full of remorse. Because I had already ruined one life by my actions, and I didn't want to ruin another by my silence. As everyone left the house, Detective Adetoy stood on the porch watching Shanti being put into the police car. He thought about the chain of events that led to the tragedy, the fatal passion, the betrayal, the anger that spiraled out of control. About how one decision, one moment of weakness, can change the lives of several people forever. A silver ring with the imprint of a cabinet knob. Such a small detail, but it was the one that revealed the truth. The detective shook his head. There wasn't a case in his practice where the truth hadn't found its way out, sooner or later. The car with Shanti touched down. She had a trial ahead of her, possibly years in jail. And Detective Adetoy had a new case, new mysteries, new human tragedies. This is his way, to seek truth amidst lies, order amidst chaos.